there is not a heaven and hell in my book. Heaven and hell is what we make it. I believe, we experience heaven and hell right here on earth. If you are caught up in an external or worldly mindset, but you've been programmed to believe, you're absolutely stuck or trapped in that program. It's kind of what happened to me before learning that God was within me. I came to realize that I had just been going along with what I've been taught. This is America, this is history, this is what works. If you do this, you can be successful. And all of these different, modes of programming that we've all fallen into just based on the need for higher authority to kind of get their way. Hey, what's up? This is James Parker, and I'm on Your Superior Self.
Oh man, James, that was awesome. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you for having me, Trey.
So I want to talk to you in depth about your new book, The Wealth Spark. I think you talk a lot about abundance and success, and it's actually endorsed by Michael Beckwith,
Yes,
Reverend Michael Beckwith, right?
yes.
So I want to know, how in the world do we create more abundance, prosperity in our lives in this reality? But first, I want to know, how do you experience this reality?
This reality or the reality of abundance and success?
This reality.
Yes. So I am one who believes that we create our reality through our thoughts and actions. So the reality that I am seriously trying to create is one of abundance, one of greater experiences, one of meaningful relationships, one of sustained success, and I do that through creating a positive mindset for myself. Having good habits and setting good goals and, just making the best of life, trying to live a life of abundance.
Mm. So now, how do you live in that reality of abundance, right? Is that the
Uh,
same thing? Positive mindset?
yeah, well, it's a positive mindset, but at its depths, the wealth spark is really about holistic wealth. It's about bringing forth a more multidimensional frame of success, and to barrel down on it. It's really about looking at our own personal growth. Bringing forth meaningful relationships, living a life of purpose, and just kind of sustaining that life through, a bunch of, tools and practices. And I kind of lay them out in the book as ways of bringing forth our highest self.
Highest self.
Yes.
So let's get into that, man. How did you grow up, right? Like what was your experience in spirituality?
Oh boy. So I grew up, just in a regular middle class home. Two parents, both, working really hard and striving, to get us to an education. And education was a serious thing in our home. In fact, we weren't allowed to play sports or do anything unless, we were bringing home the grades. They weren't going to reward bad behavior. But right around in my high school years, my dad had a slip and fall where he developed a blood clot in his brain. And, over time, he deteriorated and passed away a few
Hmm.
years later from after a few surgeries and them trying so many different things. And my mom was a very religious person, and she was taking us to church almost, it felt like every day of the week. And we were in more of a fundamental evangelical Protestant religious group. And it just wasn't working for me. I'm now 17, 18 years old. I'm, trying to figure out what it means to be an adult. And just, fundamental religion just was not moving me. And I was invited to a study group meeting by a friend, and I really believe that we were just kind of, bouncing off of each other. They were kind of nervous, and I was kind of nervous, and so we went together and sat in the group. And Trey, I heard the words, "God is within you," and I had never heard those words before,
Hmm.
and it brought forth this this need to take this quest into more spiritual understanding and more learning more about the mind. And I ended up working at it, reading a bunch of books. I started with the game of life and how to play it, and that book just kind of opened me up, and it took me deeper into the quest. And I ended up in seminary after meeting Marianne Williamson, and she was our spiritual leader at the time, and we had 2,500 people in the church group. And I was just moved. I don't know why. I was in business at the time and was doing well, but for some reason I felt called to ministry and went into seminary, and just, things just started to happen. Seminary was an absolute breeze. I couldn't believe how it was just coming to me. And I just really believe that was from something that was greater than me. It was bigger than me. It was just happening. And I just flowed with it, and it worked out.
Mm. How'd your mom take that?
My mom, well, yeah, I was a little skeptical at first. She had her own way of believing, and it was very traditional, and the whole esoteric thing or coming into a growth mindset, and those things weren't a part of what she believed. But I remember her clearly saying to me, as long as it leads you to God, James, do it. And for me, it was leading to God, and so she supported it, in that way in the beginning, and then later she started attending my services and coming to church, and just being involved.
Wow. So how do you think, and for the people listening, like her interpretation of what God is, and then what your interpretation of God is,
Oh,
what's the
my
differences? And then did she ever come to believe more so what, you know what I mean? Did she ever
make the
see how,
shift.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, that's a good question. Yeah, so there are a ton of differences, but I would say the main difference is in modern, American religion. God is in the heavens up above. Uh, Jesus is probably equated to being God, and then there's a Holy Spirit that Jesus gives to all of us as a comforter. Um, but from a spiritual perspective, from what I've come to learn, there is a higher power or a greater source that I call God that lives within us. It's a part of our being. Jesus himself said the kingdom of God is within you, and then says, seek ye first the kingdom of God, and all things shall be added to you. So it was a much deeper and more intricate way of having a relationship with not only myself but with something greater within me. And my mom, she heard those words. She liked those words, but she didn't necessarily ever come around to those beliefs. And I understand that. I mean, that traditional religion has been around for a couple of thousand years, and people have always kind of flowed with it, and it's people are kind of programmed and wired to it.
sure. What about family members, friends?
Friends. Oh yeah, friends. My best friends are coming to my services. They believe that they are children of God and that God is within them. And people who I grew up around. They're everyone's kind of doing their own thing. For me, I wasn't necessarily looking to engage others in my own practice. It just became a part, of my life, and I wanted to pursue it. And it's supported me, and anyone who seeks to be inspired by that kind of understanding. I am certainly one to help them in that quest.
Sure. So seminary school, is that provided through Unity, or is that something totally different?
Yeah, Unity has a 4-year seminary program, and so I attended, yes, that program.
So what do they teach you that's different than traditional seminary, right? Do they teach you the different books of the Bible? Do they teach what does that look like?
No, the curriculum is it's pretty stringent. I would say we don't learn different books in the Bible. We kind of go through the entire Bible, chapter by chapter, but we take a different approach. We don't believe in the literal interpretation of the Bible. We don't believe that God was storming villages and killing children, and all these different things that are kind of laid out in the Bible. We also gained a greater understanding of how the Bible was actually written, how it was formed, how it originated, seeing that Moses wrote the first five books, tells us that the book of Genesis may not be all it's cracked up to be, because how would
You said it,
Moses
man. You
how
said
would
it.
Moses write the beginning of time?
Well, that's the thing. Yeah.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
I think I've been listening to I'm more open-minded to different interpretations of the Bible.
sure,
Like just recently, I've like there's a fellow that I have been following and his name is slipping my mind, but he talks about how the names of God in the Old Testament could
sure,
possibly be like pluralized, right? And
yes,
it could mean more than one God. So if it's more than one God, like who are they, right? Like is it a council? Like,
sure, sure. Yeah, and that brings forward a whole different discussion. In the probably fourth century or something. They had the Council of Nicaea, and so there's always been these groups that have come together, or councils, based on who was in power at the time or what government was in control, and they would make changes to biblical texts. And so all these different authorities had their a different name for God. There was the traditional ones, the Jehovah's, and El Shaddai, and all these others, God Himself. But there are many others that are in the Bible. But what for me, I really believe that all paths lead to one God. So regardless of how it's named, I think it's the essence that we're looking for. And for me, God's essence is love. It's
sure.
kind of the glue that holds everything together.
Yeah. I love that. Yeah, it was I can't believe his name is slipping me, but he would say like Elohim means
Sure,
it's plural for something like a higher or higher entities or something like that. So, and there's
sure,
a like Yahweh and things like that. He was
yes,
trying to say that these names were of different entities, not the one, right?
sure,
And
yeah,
Jesus was speaking more about the one, the Father of the true God of the cosmos
mhm,
that is in everything and everywhere, right?
yeah,
Whereas the Old
mhm,
Testament was basically speaking about different entities that were claiming to be God. And then he was talking about how you could interpret the book of Ezekiel, I think it is Ezekiel, where there is like some story of like possible like higher non-human intelligence contact in there and given demonstrations of that, which I thought was fascinating because
sure,
there's just so many books that I haven't really read, so like I don't really dive deep into that.
right,
But there could be different interpretations depending upon your faiths or programming. But um,
absolutely,
I'm really curious to like how unity interprets or if their seminary was different, like you dive deep into the philosophies, how you guys interpret it as far as how you set up your weekly sermons or your weekly teachings and how that, and you know what I mean? Like, how
sure,
do you roll prosperity into your messaging from the Bible? Because I feel like a lot of it is we have these wounds around prosperity that a
mhm,
lot of us have developed through religion and
absolutely,
dogma because like we're taught that in order to be a good person you are supposed to give everything you have to God, right? Essentially,
sure,
you're supposed to bear the cross and give everything you got
sure.
and basically feel guilty if you have money. But that's
Yeah,
just my
yeah.
interpretation.
No, that's a very good interpretation. In fact, that is probably the biggest misconception in our world, is that somehow having enough wealth or money leads to greater well-being of some sort, and that's just not true. And that's kind of the premise behind the book, is that I want people to see the multidimensional, the holistic wealth around it. But to answer your question, in Unity, seminary was seminary in and of itself, going back now 20 years and understanding the process, is really a purging process. It's to determine who's truly called and who's not, because you're going to have to shed the old self, the person who you were. And many people aren't able to do that. And so the challenge for me in coming forward into seminary was, boy, I've got these businesses and, I've got this life and, who would give that up? And it became something greater for me. So when I went into seminary, it was Bible, 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 meaning, from Old Testament to New Testament. And then, and, how do we interpret it? How do we look at it? And we kind of take a metaphysical approach to the Bible and unity, meaning we try to see beyond the physical of the situation. So we try to narrow down to what's real, what's common sense, what makes sense. And so we kind of look at it that way. And we find that, there's the mind of God and we're all in it, because if God is in everything universally or multi universally, then we are in there as well, in that mind or in that process of God.
Sure.
And God can be anything. I mean, it could be energy, it could be light, it could be, substance. There you really can't name something that's just so far outside of the realm of understanding. But the truth of it is that we went through homiletics, how to speak to people. We went through, world religions, so we learned them all, whether it's Sikh or Buddhism or Catholicism. We also did a lot of internships, learning, going in and working in hospitals, learning chaplaincy and, learning how to, develop a youth ministry and, bring forth the core of youth. And it just kind of went on like that. There was a lot of different parts to it. And you kind of fall into, what works for you. But just like going to university, um, uh, you learn a whole lot of stuff, but boy, how
Well,
much of it do we use?
yeah, how much do you use like out of your major? How much do you apply, right?
Sure, sure.
And so I think it speaks to the fact that you have to stay in the books, right? Um,
Yeah, yeah.
but I'm curious, right? So in um my religious experience, it's always God is always discussed in like the second or third person, right?
Sure.
I really have taken responsibility for my own experiences with God or the source or however you want to
Yep.
label that and have a first person experience. Have you ever had a first person experience with that source, with that God, like either through a mystical experience or like a really profound personal relationship, communication, like anything similar to that?
Oh, Trey, honestly, I have those experiences every day.
Mm,
I have come into a true center of my being, and I truly believe that God lives in me. So I am very mindful. I practice meditation every day. I do prayer work, well, not only with myself but with others. I try to always make contact, with the source of my being because over these years I've just learned that whatever it is, it works. I can't explain it. All I can say is that, the more I go within and I make contact with, the spirit of my being, the more I show gratitude for this life I've been given and everything in it, the more, I reach out to make contact through, being prayerful of, myself, my life, and others. As I said to you, I was seriously in prayer for Baltimore a couple of weeks ago, because I believe that prayer works. And so, in doing that, I find myself many times, there's an old fundamental term, slain in the spirit. I don't want to say slain in the spirit. I'm not like falling out, or doing any of those things, but I can certainly feel those moments of awakening happening in
mm,
me. And, it's just a powerful feeling. And it I don't want to say takes control, but what it does is that it just gives me this enormous feeling of gratefulness. And I find myself just being thank you, God, thank you, God, thank you, God, because I
hmm
find myself, realizing just how much of a gift we all have having this life, having a mind, being able to move, being able to see, being able to think, being able to breathe, all of these things we take for granted,
Sure,
are just amazing factors.
sure. Have you ever done any hospice work?
I have, yeah, yeah, and that's some very powerful work. Yeah, yeah, honestly, I have always been one to talk to people about, uh, preparation and increase and decrease in life, in our life system. And so I realize that, as we age, all of us, we're going through a time of decrease, deterioration, in a sense. But that doesn't mean that we're not able to also expand or increase through our spirituality. So when I'm working in hospice, I really try to bring something that people can feel uplifted about it. And, people are staring death in the face in that moment. And, most of us are not prepared for it at all,
Hmm.
knowing that it's going to happen. But, the challenge is, sitting with someone, getting them to accept, that, this moment is coming, but that it's not the end. It is just the beginning to something greater.
Sure. Do you ever have conversations with people that are in hospice, or have you witnessed any of them having like visions of their past loved ones come speak to them? Do they see them in the room? Have you ever had a shared death experience when they're passing over, like any of those phenomena?
I have heard people say it. I have talked to people who said they've had those experiences. Being one on the outside looking in, I can only nod and appreciate what they're saying, but not really feel or get into what it is that they actually experience. Um, I I absolutely believe that there is some sort of other side, but I believe that that could be just a realm of spirit where energy goes, because I've seen enough people now die or transition where I see something leaves the body in that moment. Like
Hmm.
at that moment, it goes from, you can see life in someone. But most of us see life as movement, thinking the things that you and I are doing right now. But when you see it leave the body, when you see like something transition, you know that something just left. Something moved away from that
Sure.
person. And so I absolutely believe that there is something else happening that to speculate about it, I wouldn't even
I love
attempt to.
speculation, man. Come on, James.
Yeah, I know
That's
you
what
do,
this show
Trey.
is. We speculate on this show, bro.
Do we really? Well, I
Well,
I
I
could
think
get into all sorts of speculations,
well,
but
that's I love speculation. I mean, what is the truth? I think everyone has their own truth, right?
sure,
To
sure.
say that I know the truth, I mean, you're a liar because you know what I
Absolutely.
mean? So, I I went and took my son to see Dune 2 this past
Mhm,
weekend,
mhm.
and I'm not going to ruin it for everyone, but
Okay.
there's a part in there, a death scene where someone dies and the I guess the group that the guy, the main character is living with is out in the desert and they don't have access to a lot of water. So they basically, one method of, I guess, preserving water is to suck the water out of that body, right? And they do something with it. I don't know. But for the
Hmm.
person that was a part of their culture, part of their group, they took his water and they took it back to their city or their lair. And there's this temple and there's this large area of like a lake almost, like underground. And
Sure.
it was very sacred to them. They basically put that guy's water from his body into this lake. And I didn't think anything of it, right? It was like, I don't know how many drops. It could have been a bottle full of
Sure.
water. I don't know what it was, but that symbolized to me the one person, individual person, persona going back and combining with the whole, right? Like going
Sure.
back into the ocean, the one
Mhm.
drop merging with the ocean. And it went over my head for a minute because there's a lot going on in that movie. But when I think about it now, when I look back at it and think about it, I was like, that's very powerful symbolism for what I interpret could possibly happen when we pass. Is that one drop, that individual persona, that life goes back and merges with the whole, right?
Yeah,
Now,
absolutely.
what is your thoughts, right? What is your I guess, belief system around death? Like, what happens? Do you guys talk about, do souls, in your opinion, go to heaven or hell? Do they go to the universe? Do they merge with the one? Like, what's your philosophy on that?
Yeah, my personal philosophy on that, Trey, is that there is not a heaven and hell in my book. There, heaven and hell is what we make it. I believe, we experience heaven and hell right here on earth. But what happens during the transition, I believe, is that we all go back into the energy. Everything is energy. Everything is energy. Everything has, matter, movement, substance. So I believe that we just go back into the energy of the universe, and so it's kind of like one of my favorites is the Matrix.
Oh, yeah.
The whole concept behind we're all just batteries, creating the energy of the life cycle of the world. And so I believe that we absolutely as spirit, I believe spirit is energy, and that energy goes back into the basis of creating or being part or expanding our universe.
Yeah. You just open up a rabbit hole. Do you think that we're trapped though? Like kind of like in the Matrix to where we are prisoners of that system and why, we are supplying it energy?
Well, there's a very good question. I do believe that. I don't believe that we are, but I believe that it's absolutely possible based on how we think. And if you are caught up in an external or worldly mindset, what you've been programmed to believe, you're absolutely stuck or trapped in that programming and how it works. And that's kind of what happened to me before learning that God was within me. I came to realize that I had just been going along with what I've been taught. This is America, this is history, this is what works. If you do this, you can be successful, and pay your taxes and the government will take care of you, and just all of these different, modes of programming that we've all fallen into just based on the need for higher authority to kind of get their way. And I've come to understand that I don't need the government to help me, and I don't have to do things a certain way in order to find fulfillment and satisfaction. That this life here is something for me to create. For me to explore, for me to journey into, and yeah, and I could just kind of take that approach.
Sure. So how do you walk in that world, like that newer world? Like what I'm hearing you describe is this world that we've all been programmed to of lack and scarcity, which I think a
Sure.
lot of religious followers feel that and
Yep.
day in and day out, not just because of religion, but because of society and norms and rules and all that. How do you change that? How do you totally recreate your reality? How do you become the creator in this reality?
Yeah. Well, I think it starts by being someone um who makes their decisions, who has their thoughts, and who, and gets their ideas from something within them. I think if we become programmed to television or to different things out there and spend our time, trying to find or make a life based on our external views, we're really just, caught up in the views of someone else. That's something that someone else has created. I think we're the most innovative creatures on this planet, and there are always new and greater ideas and perspectives coming forth. And where do they come from? They come from us, you know what I mean? And
Or
from
does it come from some type of higher intelligence that we're
well,
tapping into through
and that's
flow
what I'm going.
states?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, and that's where I'm going. They come from us, but that us is our connection or that link to something greater within us. I don't believe that anything is done, solely. I think that we have to be synced up with something, and through that syncing, we bring forth, what we call in unity divine ideas, and we turn those ideas into something that we can outwardly express. And
sure.
so that's kind of the way we look at it.
Yeah, I love that. I think there are methods and modal well, I should say there are uh practices that you can implement into your life that kind of
Mhm.
fine tune that mechanism, that
Sure.
tool of tapping into, right? Our natural ability to tap into these higher intelligences
Absolutely.
and receive information. And some people actually tune into non-human intelligences, like the channels and things of that nature, to where
Sure.
they can receive guidance and or messages for themselves or for other people to kind of help them along the way. But I'm really interested in like I've come across this concept and going back to the Matrix where like Neo, when he's in the Matrix, like they're hyping him up the entire time to be this Messiah, right?
Sure.
And like he's basically told the Oracle, I think it was like, you're not the Messiah.
Right.
You're not
Sure.
that.
No.
But at the very end, he becomes the Messiah. But that's the thing. He becomes the Messiah. Like he might not necessarily be the one, but he became the one, like the archetype, right? It's like becoming the archetype of that Messiah.
Sure.
And how do you become that, right? Like you have to walk the walk. Like you have to talk the talk. You have to feel the feels, all the feels.
Hmm.
And you have to it's not like you have to imagine yourself to be it. You actually have to be it. If
Yeah.
any of that makes sense.
No, it absolutely makes sense, and it's absolutely true. And beyond that, we all have the ability to be the Messiah. Messiah. The definition of Messiah is anointed one. We all have the anointing because God is in there with us. The problem is that we're born. We start taking classes, learning from our parents, and we're learning what our parents have learned, and they're learning what their parents have learned. So we're taking in all this information that's been coming in from generation to generation to generation, and not all positive information. There's cluttering in someone's life, or there's anger in someone's life, or someone may have been betrayed. And they bring all of that stuff in to bear, and we learn it from them. Even if it's indirectly. And so it's very true that we all have the ability to be that thing, but we've been kind of reprogrammed and trained to be a certain way. We've been taught to move our thoughts to the outside instead of keeping them on the inside. We've been taught to see with these eyes instead of looking out through our third eye. And so
Oh,
when we can start really seeing that what we have is something so great and so powerful. I mean, imagine being the only species on a planet that has an intelligence. And thinking that with there being trillions of planets out there, that most of us don't even factor in that there's probably a lot more planets like this, and people
sure.
like us. And so I think our challenge is that we kind of get dumbed down, at a very young age, and being dumbed down keeps us, in the cycle of work, and in the cycle of paying our taxes, in the cycle of looking to authority, for how we should move and how we should be, and we get trapped there, like you spoke of earlier. But we absolutely have the ability to break out of it, and not to say that we don't. We should still pay our taxes. We should still work. We should still do these things, but we shouldn't think the way others think. We should think with the mind of God that is within us.
Hmm. Well, I think we've been conditioned
Sure.
to forget, right? To forget who
Yeah.
we truly are.
Yeah.
And there have been people that have been made examples of of Jesus, for example, is a perfect example of what happens when you step into your own power. Like not
Absolutely.
only government, but religion will come after you and do
Absolutely.
you away
Yes.
and make you an example and show the people like this is what happens when you try to be different, guys. We don't
Yeah.
like this. And there's been many, 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 many examples of people that have been made examples of. And so what that does, it rewards us, or it reinforces the forgetfulness
Sure.
over generation, over generation, over generation of like
Yeah.
why we don't remember is because they were made examples and then no one wanted to step in their follow in their footsteps, and so we
Sure.
forgot who we truly are. I mean that our punishments over the generations of centuries of stepping into our own power, all that trauma is within us, like in the body. I mean,
Absolutely.
over our evolution. So when you start stepping into that power, you're not only going against societal norms, when you're not only going against your programming from early childhood, but you're also going against ancestral trauma. And so,
Sure.
like that uncomfortableness, that fear that you fear, is totally natural. It's like the ones that are brave enough, I mean, and have the courage to step through that fear and that fire and continue to go are the ones that get rewarded at the end. They're the ones
That's right.
that that recreate the realities, but it's not
That's right.
easy. It's not
Yeah.
easy. It takes courage. It's like spirituality, man. Like everybody thinks spirituality is just love and light. It's always just love and light. No, spirituality is both. It's all of it. It's like you don't grow unless you're in the dark. And if you
That's
think
right.
about it, we spend the first 9 months in the dark, completely
That's right.
being created. So we're
Yeah.
all built in the dark.
Yeah.
And then we're born, and then we're automatically told all of these things that we should be and how we should act. And these are the rules of society. And if you don't obey the rules of society, then you're punished. And not talking about laws, I'm talking about the
No,
conditions and the programs, right?
I understand. Yeah.
And so to go against that is it's kind of like seeing the programs, but in order to break those programs, you're going to have to live a totally different life. And that could be confusing for some and hard for others because
Mhm.
how do you change something and be something that you have no idea how to do? Right? If that
Sure.
makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah. Absolutely, it makes sense, and that is actually absolutely the purpose that for us taking our own quest of us finding what works for us. And you're absolutely right. You know, these things happen to Jesus and others, but you know, Jesus would not have been persecuted had he kept his stuff to himself. You know,
Exactly. That's
you
what
know
I
what I
mean,
mean?
though. He
Like that.
stepped up.
Yeah,
He stepped up.
they were very cool with him, you know, being whatever he wanted to be, as long as he did it on his own, you know. But the moment he started to influence others, which started to, screw with their system, you know, whether it was religious or religion or government, you know, they needed to make a change in order to keep their systems the way they were, even though it was a snowball rolling downhill. It was going to change no matter what. Jesus just kind of, you know, was there to, you know, support that change, but it was going to happen anyway. And that's kind of, you know, what you're talking about. Things are going to evolve no matter what. Our job, I believe, you and I and people like us who have a platform, is to continue to hold people to the truth. You know, like what is true for you, what is really true for you, not what's true for, you know, society or your neighborhood or the community, but what's true for you, you know, what works for you, because a lot of people are out here doing things that are just not working for them. They
Mhm.
know it, they go to sleep with it, they wake up with it, and it's just this endless cycle of scare. I call it the illusion of scarcity. You know, just kind of stuck in that place, you know, where you know, they don't believe that, you know, they have chances. They never believe it's enough. You know, things, the challenges show up and they don't know how to work through them, and it's just so real for them. But actually, it's not real. What's real is that you are alive. What's real is that, you know, we live in the world. You know, what's real is that you have the ability to change your circumstances. And you know, when people begin to see things that way, when they begin to see that I can change my situation, I can retrain my mind, I can come forward with a whole new outlook. You know, I don't have to be the way I used to be. You know, that's, that's just something that's beautiful and wonderful.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think you're spot on that. And now, like, of course, I'd speak about Jesus like I know him, right? Like I read
Same,
the Bible just like everybody
same.
else, and I personally, I feel like going back to your truth, um, was there a man who lived as Jesus? Maybe, probably. I really don't. I
Sure,
don't know personally
sure.
firsthand. I don't know. I go off of what is said and told. But again, I think going back to your truth, like I can ask those questions and immediately get an answer, right? Like if I go into those deep
Right.
states of meditation and find out for myself, like was there a man? I don't think it really matters. I think it's the concept of,
Exactly.
what he stood for is really what is the most important thing here
Absolutely.
is going back within yourself and becoming the things that he stood for. And
Sure.
then it doesn't really matter if he lived or not because then you become that. And
That's
then,
right.
you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
so when people, it's always like, and I don't judge. It's just when you hear people talk about their relationship with Jesus, it should be your relationship with yourself. It should be you're doing these things. Like he
That's
was
right.
just an example. And
That's right.
I kind of laugh. I kind of, I tell friends, I'm like, I kind of imagine like Jesus, he may have been a ball buster. Who knows? He may have been hanging out with those
Sure,
boys, telling
absolutely.
jokes. We don't know. I mean,
Yeah,
but I think personalize that for yourself. And, going back to your point about going within, not enough people do because they'll receive information or guidance and then immediately doubt it and say, I don't know if this is true or accurate because how do I measure it against the external world when the
absolutely.
external world is telling me that I'm wrong? So I'm
Yeah.
curious, James, like to your experience and to your journey, like how did you measure that? How did you validate? How did you um, receive information and then fact check it for yourself to determine whether or not that's true for you?
Yeah, so that's another good question. So I absolutely believe that we do receive information, contact, different ideas and energy from within, from our source, from God, and I believe that the ego though does play a part. The ego will come in and talk to us, and so we do need to be able to discern which is ego and which is spirit. And for me, what's worked for me over the years is when I do receive something, whether it's through meditation or just wake up with something, or those morning ideas, they hit us all. I fact check them by one determining factor, and that is, does everybody win in the scenario? Because I absolutely know that God is not going to make one thing good for me that's bad for someone else. You know what I mean? Like, so when I receive information, I check it by saying, does everyone win in this scenario? If it's win-win for everyone involved, then it's absolutely God. If it's an idea that I can innovate and bring to the world that's going to make the world a better place, that's God. If it's an idea that's going to support my forgiveness of others and their forgiveness of me, that's God. So I just really check it by making sure, or knowing that at the best in the best and worst case scenario, everyone is winning.
Hmm. Can you talk about, I'm just really curious now, just thinking about it, like your firsthand experience with manifestation. Like, is there something in your life that you consciously created, that you consciously had affirmations for? Like, how did you create it into your reality? And then when it happened, what was your reaction to that?
Um, I would say writing this book was one of those experiences. I started with I was hit with an idea, but it wasn't just any idea. It actually felt like it was something that was waiting for me. And it started with a title, but it was kind of, it was just something cool that was there in the back of my mind, and then boom, it hit me, full force. It wasn't like a quiet like thought anymore. It became something loud and clear, in my mind, and so it was a time where my heart was pounding, so I knew that stuff was happening. It was rolling around in me. It was excitement mixed with, a touch of nerves. I was, venturing into something that was unknown to me, and it felt like, there were hurdles and doubts that were showing up, and it was trying to weigh me down. But what came forward, is you know, every time I I was writing and I got tripped up or something, I still felt like this push, the next day or something, like get back at it, and it was this gentle nudge, and I knew that it was God, what I mean, because me, the old me, would have been like, God, screw this, I'm out of here. I'm not doing this anymore. I've got better things to do. So I knew it was God, and I knew it was some sort of calling, to do, and from there, I just knew it was more than just bringing an idea forth. It kind of showed me that incredible things happen when we sync up with God, and taught me that the concept of the wealth spark, that true wealth and abundance is not something that we do solo. It's about joining forces with that higher power within us. And
Sure.
the money isn't being rich, and money are not the same. And so I really just came to develop this idea of the well spark out of this consciousness of, God working in and through me.
Why do you think a lot of people want to be rich?
Because of television,
Hmm.
because of what they see. I remember being a kid and I saw the guy, the insurance man, used to drive around. This is the '60s,
The insurance
the
man.
insurance man. Yeah, he's driving around in a big Cadillac, and like, what the heck, and should I be an insurance man? So I think we just, we just kind of mimic what we see or what excites us, and television is definitely giving us an idea of what being rich is. They only glamorize it. You never see the other side of it. And boy, more money, more problems. They have some big problems, in spite of all the money we see.
Mhm.
And they have some challenges. They still deal with loneliness and heartbreak and sadness. And you don't see it when someone's getting on a Lear jet, but it's there.
Well, when someone comes to you, like what's the number one thing that they want to create for themselves?
Number one is prosperity. Yeah, and it's the second, followed up by personal health challenges. But people are feeling the economy, the global experience, that we are kind of trapped in a world right now that's just kind of confused and divided, and things are just kind of falling off. And that was the purpose for writing the book. Really was so many people were coming to me with prosperity questions, but for them prosperity meant money, and and so it became this teaching moment for me to talk about wealth and abundance and success and how it really works, and finding that multidimensional way of being happy on different levels, in our relationships, in our health, in our finances, just being on par, finding joy in everything.
Speaking of multi dimensions, do you think there are different timelines where, and this is again speculation, so feel free to have fun with this
Sure,
question. Like,
sure.
but do you think there's timelines where you make a decision and something branches off in this reality to where you're actually, you know what I mean? Like your awareness is here now, having a conversation with me, but 10 choices ago, like your life could have been totally different, right? And it's actually taking place in an alternate dimension.
Uh, I believe that energy moves, and there's a movement to energy. And I'll give you a couple of examples. Many people have had those moments where they've had an idea for a new event, for a new invention, and then they didn't follow it through. And then weeks later, you'll see that invention on television. You're like, I thought of that. That was my idea. It's the universe puts it out there, and if you don't use it, it'll move on. The other one is the whole concept of the. It's an old concept of the 99 monkeys, and how somewhere in the world, monkeys used to shake the tree to
Mhm.
get their bananas. And then one day, a monkey climbed the tree, and shook the bananas down from there, and so many bananas fell. And then somewhere on the other side of the world, another monkey climbed the tree and did the same thing. It's just, I think energy flows that way. And once it comes to the surface, or it comes out as an idea, it is in the universe, is in the sphere, whatever timeline it's in.
Sure. Because I'm really interested in hearing people's stories about glitches in reality in the
Oh,
system. Like people have talked about the Mandela effect, right?
sure,
And
yeah.
that's a thing. And
Mhm.
so to me, that's an example of a timeline where a
Sure.
large number of people remember something that happened, and a larger number of people are like, no, that didn't happen. Have you ever had experiences like that where you've seen glitches in the system?
Yeah, I'm not necessarily. I'll go back to our Matrix, where deja vu was a glitch in the Matrix, and so have I had moments of deja vu? Absolutely, and so those sure can be glitches, but again, it's for me, it's still in the flow of energy somewhere.
Mm,
Yeah.
yeah, I love those questions, man. in the hot seat, man. I got to put you in the hot seat.
Thank you.
Um, and you're doing a great job, by the way.
I
I'm
appreciate
very
that.
impressed. I'm
Well,
very
I
impressed.
love your show and I love the questions. I hadn't received these questions before. It's making me, yeah, it's bringing out my muscles,
Do you
man.
still have your seminary books? You might want to pull them bad boys out real
Oh
quick.
boy, yeah. I don't think you
Um,
can ever get rid of those
I
things.
know, right? That's for sure. James, man, this has been an amazing conversation. I really appreciate your time. How can people connect with you and how can they buy the book?
Oh, Trey, thank you for the time. You can find the WellSpark at thewellsparkbook.com. And if you come to the website, you can purchase the book. You can also receive free affirmations. You can receive free visualization practices. And there's a bunch of articles and things for people to read and find. It's just a community of good people. So, yeah, thewellsparkbook.com.
Awesome, man. So before we go, like, is there anything on your heart that you want to share with the audience
You know,
to give them right now?
if I could share something with the audience, I really want to say that um, this whole quest, this exploration that we are on, is about finding your superior self. So just being here on your show really makes a difference because I want people to find their highest self, and the Wellspark will help you do that. But at the same time, allow yourself to get into some mindfulness practices. Begin, to pray. However you do it. Just if you're just saying thank you, God, or just show gratitude. I really think that if enough of us get into the energy and light of going within and finding ourselves, it'll become this collective movement to make our world a better place.
Beautiful, man. Thank you so much, dude.
Thank you, Trey. I really appreciate being on your show.